welcome to the Dr. Pepper Museum and Free Enterprise Institute. I'm Brian Henson, the program's manager, and we'd like to take a little bit of a tour around the museum today. Before we do that, I want to talk just a brief bit about the history of Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper was created right here in Waco at the corner of 4th and Austin Avenue in Dr. Morrison's old corner drugstore back in 1885. Dr. Charles Alderton, a pharmacist, created the drink by blending 23 different fruit-flavored syrups together. Now, the building that we're in today at the corner of 5th and Mary was built in 1906, and it was the first corporate headquarters for Dr. Pepper and is considered the home of Dr. Pepper. And with that being said, we'll take a little bit of a tour today. This is what we call the classroom. It's on the second floor, and you'll notice that the floor in here is very uneven. Most of the people, when they come in here, they assume that since the building is nearly 100 years old, it's a little bit saggy near the edges. Well, it was actually made this way on purpose. The second floor here is where they used to manufacture the syrup, and to make that syrup, what they did, they started off with a bunch of sugar, just a little bit of water. They would cook that down into what's called a simple syrup, and then they added the fruit flavors, the herbs, the extracts to make their finished syrup concentrate. Now, no matter how careful you are, by the end of the day, you're gonna have a mess. And so what they did, they made the middle part of the floor 5.5 inches higher than over near the edges. The floor is waterproof. They put a layer of tar paper in between the first and second floor. And at the end of the day, they just hooked up a water hose and hosed everything down where the dirty water would flow over towards the edges, where there's a gutter system that goes all the way around the building. Wish I had that system in my kitchen today. This is the artesian well where they actually got the water from to make the soft drinks here in the early years. The building, as I said, was completed in 1906, and they bottled soft drinks here from 1906 until the mid-1960s. At that point, they wanted to add in a canning line, but canning equipment just takes up a lot more space. The building wasn't big enough. They built their new factory over across town, and they closed this one down. Now, when they were restoring the building back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the railing here, the glass blocks, the cover over the well, none of that was here. There was just a solid concrete floor over here in the corner, although they knew the well was underneath it. They brought in a gentleman with a jackhammer, and he broke through the concrete. They found that top row of bricks. They started digging out the well. Now, they dug down through just a little bit of dirt until they started finding broken bottles. Lots of broken bottles. You can see there in the corner what the inside of the well looked like, which was stuffed completely full of all this old broken glass. Now, what they found out when they went back and did a little research was that in the 1920s, the city of Waco had passed a little ordinance that said if you've got a well inside a building, it needs to be filled and capped. And rather than pay someone to haul in a bunch of dirt and rocks and so forth, they just used it as a big trash dump over the next 30 some odd years. The bottom down there that you can see is about 27.5 feet down. When they were digging out the well, they just dug down to the water level. We do know the well goes a little bit deeper than that. We're just not sure how much deeper. This is an 1898 filler capper made by the Crown Cork and Seal Company. Very simple machine. There's no motor, there's no engine. It's all powered by gravity. Now, if you look up above us, you'll notice some big crock jars up there. Those are syrup mixers, or syrup containers. That's what they'd mix the Dr. Pepper syrup in. And it would run down this little pipe through the hose to the back side of this machine. The second hose here was connected to the water supply. The water was pumped up to the third floor of the building where it was distilled and filtered. They ran it back down here, they chilled it, they carbonated it, and so it was a line with syrup and a line with carbonated water. Now, what the workers would do is they'd take their empty bottles, set it here on this little platform under the spigot, you flip that lever, that puts in your syrup. It was all hand measured, no machine measuring there, it was all done by hand. They'd move the bottle here to the middle, flip this lever, that would put in the carbonated water. Now, normally you would think, well, the next thing that you'd have to do is to mix it. Well, if you start mixing it up, you're going to have a big mess on your hands. So what they would actually do is cap it. This dish here in the front held a supply of caps. They'd put the cap on, stick it back under the middle again, and mash down on a foot pedal, which would cause this top section to move up and down, and that would crown the bottles. In other words, it would pinch one of these little caps or crowns on here nice and tight so that it stayed on till you took it off with a bottle opener. To mix it, very simple process. You simply swung it upside down, brought it back down, and that was all it took to make a good, tasty Dr. Pepper. Using this machine, a good worker could make about 6 bottles a minute. Today, they're getting close to 3,000 bottles a minute. A little bit faster, but still the same basic process. Empty bottle, flavored syrup, carbonated water, cap it, and mix it. Now this is a case featuring some of the oldest bottles we have, going all the way back to the mid and late 1800s. The two on the top row with the little marbles in them, that kind of gets where we get the name soda pop from. The marbles were held up against the mouths of the bottles by the gas pressure from the sodas. And when you opened them up, what you did, you pushed them down with your thumb, and the release of the gas pressure would cause a popping sound. And that's where the name soda pop comes from. Now, no tour to the Dr. Pepper Museum would be complete without going over the 10-2-4 campaign. They had a little contest, and a man by the name of Earl Racy came up with the slogan, "Drink a bite to eat at 10, 2, and 4." Now, the idea, of course, was you drink a little Dr. Pepper at those 3 times. It would keep your blood sugar levels steady all day long, keeping you full of pep and energy all day long. Now, Mr. Racy was given a $25 bonus for coming up with this wonderful slogan, and of course the company turned around and used it for several years, made millions off of it. This is a little model of Dr. Morrison's old corner drugstore where Dr. Pepper was invented back in 1885 by Dr. Charles Alderton. It's a lot smaller scale than the real corner drugstore, but it does give you a good idea of what it looked like. We had the soda fountain, a huge tobacco counter, and of course the pharmacy area. Now, a lot of people are surprised when they go back and look at the history of soft drinks to learn that many soft drinks were actually created in drugstores. There's a simple reason for that. People had been drinking and in some cases bathing in carbonated water for centuries. And it was in the 1700s and around the 1760s, early 1770s, when scientists figured out how to make carbonated water artificially in a laboratory. Now, it took some special equipment, took some special know-how, and so it was the doctors and pharmacists who had that equipment and were able to produce it in a lab. And so if you wanted to buy bottled carbonated water, you went in to your local pharmacy. Now, plain carbonated water by itself, if you've ever had a chance to drink it, doesn't taste good. And so it was in the 1830s when they started adding in fruit-flavored syrups. The first flavor was actually a lemon soda, but by the 1870s, 1880s, there were a lot of different fruit flavors that were being used, blended together. That was really the start of the soft drink industry. Now, here at the Dr. Pepper Museum, being called a jerk isn't necessarily a bad thing. We still know how to jerk an old-fashioned soda around here. We start off with a little bit of Dr. Pepper syrup, and then add some carbonated water from the fountain. Get it all mixed up and foamy here. Nothing like it. Be sure and stop by the Dr. Pepper Museum for an old-fashioned Dr. Pepper or a Dr. Pepper float real soon.